Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Paul Heinrich. I'm chairing this meeting of the Development Committee on the 19th of September 2024. For anyone who hasn't attended one of these meetings before, the officers who provide and present our reports and offer technical advice sit either side of me on this top table. In front of me in the central area sit the members of the committee who will be making decisions on the items on the agenda. Can officers introduce themselves, please?
Good morning. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Manager.
I'm Mark Brown, Senior Planning Officer.
Lauren Gregory, Democratic Services.
Fiona Croxton, Solicitor to the Council.
Thank you. Welcome members of the public, those in attendance here and those who are viewing this meeting online. For those people who've registered to speak, I will call you to the front to the end of this row when it is your turn. Before we start the usual formal business, your typical notices: fire alarm. We're not expecting a drill today, so if the alarm does sound, officers will lead you to the marked exits and you'll make your way to either the car park at the front or to the garden area and the flagpole at the rear of the building. Do not use the lift, of course. If you have a mobile phone, could you please switch it to silent or to off? Toilets are out in the foyer, as you may well have found. If necessary, we'll take a short break around 11 o'clock. Just remind the public that you should not speak to members during any break period, during a coffee break. I don't think we're likely to need a lunch break today, so let us move on to the meeting. Apologies for absence, please, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Varley. And we have one substitute, Councillor Luke Patterson for Councillor Varley.
Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the last meeting. I take it you have all read them. Are there any amendments? Any missing apostrophes? Well done. Okay, if no issues, come. Thank you. And Councillor Fisher seconding. All in favour? Thank you. Items of urgent business, I have none. Thank you. The order of business will be as on the papers. Item 7, any declarations of interest? Yes, sir.
I did receive a letter about item 10.
Item 10.
Then it's the Wells Next to the Sea.
Well, see, I think most of us have received communications on that from the various people. Okay, thank you. Right, without further ado, then let us move to the first substantive item, Bristol PF/23/2048 and its associated listed building application. We will take the two together, but there will be separate votes on each recommendation. Brian.
Thank you. Yep, as noted, this is a joint application. The proposals for the development of existing barn complex of form 11 dwellings with associated car parking, landscaping, including a ground-mounted PV array at the rear of the site. Case referred to committee as the site exceeds the 0.5 hectares threshold set out in the Constitution. Thank you. Thanks. Yep, so this is the site location plan and aerial. It's located on the north side of Feckenham Road in the countryside, just to the north of Bristol, which is a service village along with Melton Constable. Yeah, this is the existing and proposed site plans showing the development of the barns and the solar array to the rear of the site. So these are the proposed elevations for the redevelopment of Barn 1 and photographs, including the proposed perpendicular extension to the rear. Along with the extension to Barn 3, this would result in less than substantial harm to the designated assets. This the associated floor plans and site plan showing their location to the northeast of the site. So this is Barn 2, which is adjacent to Barn 1. Proposed elevations showing it's largely utilising the existing openings and bringing former openings back into use. And these are the associated floor plans and site plan. These are the proposals barn 3, which also includes a large perpendicular extension and the reworking of the south elevation. This, along with barn 1, would result in less than substantial harm to the designated assets. And these are the floor plans and site plan and the location of the barn is sort of to the west of the site. So these are the proposals for barn 4. This would be demolished and replaced by a carport. This is an older building, but has been heavily adapted as such has got limited aesthetic value. As a replacement is therefore considered acceptable. And these are barns D and E, which are adjacent to barns in 8 and 9, which are to be converted, and the land turned over to curtilage, better revealing the designated asset and enhancing the sites. And these are barns B and C, which would also be removed and made over as gardens for the adjacent units. These are the proposals for barn 5. This is the closest barn to the grade 2 designated assets, the manor farmhouse, and also sort of the oldest amongst the cluster of agricultural buildings. As you see from the proposals, features are to be kept, including retaining the central door and fixing that in an open position. Obviously, there will be use of the existing windows in the front and new openings kept to a minimum. And these are the associated floor plans and site plans showing it at the front of the site. As a barn 6 is adjacent to barn 5. Again, new openings are kept to a minimum and features such as a shutter on the sides to be retained and fixed open position. And these are the associated floor plans and site plan. These are the proposals for barn 7 for the conversion of the piggery, again reusing existing openings. And floor plans and the site located to the east of the site. These are the proposals for barns 8 and 9, which are, as you can see, one barn, but this will be subdivided to create 2 units. And the adjoining outbuilding will be turned into a cycle and bin store. New openings have been rationalised again. And these are the proposed floor plans for the 2 new units. So this is the photo of the existing agricultural barn, which is to be demolished to make way for 3 dwellings. The red outline you can see on the elevation denotes the existing barn for context of the scale. And these are the associated floor plans and the site plan to the northwest of the site. And for context, as set out in the report, there is a Class Q fallback. So these are the proposed plans associated with that. So the new plans would replace what has previously been allowed from the Class Q fallback position. So these are sort of elevations of the small battery store to be at the back of the site with the solar array and sort of the site materials for the site. And these are some of the visualizations, just sort of illustrating the landscaping and new boundary treatments. There's been some revisions to the elevations and roofing previously made, but just to illustrate for context. And the next slide shows some better graphics of the site and also showing sort of the landscaping details and sort of softer landscaping around the proposed units. So, as I say, these are the key issues. So the principle of development is supported through reuse of appropriate buildings. The impact on the designated assets, as noted, there is some less than substantial harm resulting from the conversions of units 1 and 3. It's limited to just these 2 units alone. So unequivocal conservation support can't be given, but obviously this needs to be weighed against public benefits. So I'll say there aren't affordable units included as part of the proposals, but there is a viability assessment that sets out it's not viable to do so. And that's been corroborated by an external consultee. And in this case, officers are satisfied the public benefits would outweigh the harm, including sort of the positive addition towards the housing shortfall, the long-term preservation, reuse of the building, and also enhancement of the site through demolition of inappropriate structures on the site. And also there'll be some Section 106 and a commuted sum as well, which will make a local contribution as well. Those are the main, also there's sufficient parking, sort of better landscaping proposals, good energy efficiency proposals, including air source heat pumps for the units, and also a large solar array to the rear, and also ecological mitigation enhancements and appropriate nutrient neutrality proposals to offset nutrient impacts. So the recommendation for both is, but I'll say on the full application, is to approve subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. And the listed building one, again, is the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Okay. Okay, we now move to speakers. I have no town or parish speaker. I have no objecting speaker. I have one supporting speaker, Sasha Edmonds. We'd like to come to the end there. You will have 6 minutes because we're dealing with, if you will need it, we're dealing with the two applications together. Yep.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Sasha Edmonds. I'm the agent and architect representing the two applications for Manor Farm Barns in Bristol. The application has been called before you today due to the capacity and site area of the proposed photovoltaic array at the rear of the development as set out within the scheme of delegation. The buildings in question form part of a working farm alongside a Grade 2 listed farmhouse, which is currently undergoing an extensive sympathetic renovation. The farm operates with modern farming methods and machinery, and the modest size and proximity of these barns have rendered them redundant for agricultural use. The complex has been significantly impacted by the addition of over 720 square metres of asbestos infill structure between the historic barns, which make a negative contribution to the site. Years of limited use and sporadic maintenance have only exacerbated the deterioration of the historic buildings, and an alternative use is urgently needed to prevent further degradation and ensure the long-term preservation of the heritage assets. The development of this site would contribute to the much-needed housing supply in the region, and furthermore, the applicant is uniquely positioned to address the nutrient neutrality requirements on site, ensuring the development is deliverable and ready to proceed as soon as practically possible. The large pond adjacent to the site is part of a broader network of ponds across the 600-acre farm, which underwent significant conservation work under the previous landowner, and the applicant is committed to continuing these efforts. The proposals include integrating the pond into the development through sensitive public landscaping and an ongoing maintenance plan. The proposed installation of a centralised managed photovoltaic array with battery storage, strategically positioned at the rear of the site away from view of the village, will provide a large proportion of the energy needs for the houses. In combination with high levels of insulation, mechanical ventilation and air source heat pump systems, the development will result in homes that are environmentally conscious, thermally efficient, and capable of providing 79% of their energy through renewable sources, well above the 10% policy requirement. While we acknowledge the concerns which remain following extensive consultation and amendment, the removal of such volumes of asbestos, the introduction of high-performance conservation measures, sustainable technologies, and high-quality landscaping require substantial investment beyond that of typical developments. These elements are crucial to making the project viable, as outlined within the submitted viability assessment. I therefore hope that you'll be able to support the officer's recommendation that the benefits of this development outweigh any adverse impacts and considered against the policies of the NPP.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Fletcher. You can speak from one of the sides if you want to. You can speak from one of the side benches. Yes. You have your 5 minutes, Andrew.
Oh, hello. Yes. Okay. So to set this in context, Bristol is a village with a strong sense of exploitation, of being exploited, because this is a very large village. It's the second biggest village in North Norfolk, and patchy and piecemeal development in this village has occurred with no concomitant increase in services. To give one example, which has a bearing on this application, the primary school in the village, Astley Primary School, is full, which means that anybody who has kids needs now to send them elsewhere, causing an increase in traffic and obviously, rather more hassle for parents. There's a threat to the doctor's surgery in Melton Constable, and also the increase in housing in the area, including the predilection of Google for routing people through the village unnecessarily, and the almost entire absence of pavements, which you'll experienced if you've been to the village, makes the place very perilous for pedestrians, especially younger ones. Against this background, we're considering a fairly large development, which will make somebody a very great deal of money, but with almost no benefit from the village, benefit to the village itself. I'll focus on three areas where I think action could be possible and practicable on this. The junction between the proposed development and the Fakenham Road. I might be wrong about this, but on the plan, it looks as if the approach road from the development to the Fakenham Road is actually rather narrow, obviously making passing between cars rather difficult and therefore threatening a bottleneck on the Fakenham Road on the approach during rush hours especially. I might be wrong about this. However, what is certain is that the Fakenham Road is very busy. It's far busier than the council estimate seems to make it. It's on the conservative side, I would say, on the very conservative side. Traffic notoriously goes very fast along this road because it's a straight. And there's also opposite the place where the development will lead out onto the road. There are always a lot of parked cars. I suppose that could be changed, but they are cars that are dependent on the housing opposite the development. And also in the drop-off and pick-up times for Astley School, that side of the road is almost entirely full of cars for a very, very long way. Therefore, this development will considerably increase that fundamental traffic problem. Volume of traffic and also speed of traffic are both, I think, very, very notable here. So what I would propose is that appropriate calming measures can be added, which will benefit the village as a whole, where the speed and volume of traffic along the Fakenham Road has always been a bugbear. And there is a very small number of elements in that road to dissuade people from letting it rip along it if they're predisposed to. Now, the second point of three, so I should say three main points, the development cannot comprise affordable housing as it should. Now, compensation of £50,000 has been offered in lieu of this. Two things on this. One, £50,000 seems to me, given the cost of housing at the moment, seems to me to be too little, possibly derisory. There is no guarantee that even this sum will be spent to benefit the village itself, that it'll be kind of hoovered up, distributed amongst other purposes. Can we therefore have a guarantee that this sum, if it remains the relatively low sum that it is, will actually directly, visibly, palpably benefit the village? And obviously, could it be more in view of the very large amount of money that this development will make? Thirdly, the residents and the parish council, whom I represent obviously here, are very anxious to the threat to availability of accommodation. and increase in house prices owing to second homes being built deliberately or surreptitiously in the Bristol area, as indeed in lots and lots of areas in North Norfolk.
Technically, your 5 minutes is up, Andy.
Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon.
I will allow you to continue.
Okay, very, very briefly, this is one last point. Can we, in the sense of, is it possible to, and should we, guarantee that the houses built here will not be used as second homes, but will actually house people as permanent family dwellings? Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you. Before we move into debate, could I ask officers to just clarify the access and traffic issues, please? They'll be raised from the floor anyway, so.
Yes, so there isn't sort of any formal objections from Highways on this. I'll say there were initial concerns with the inclusion of access gates in the proximity of a bin store, but these have since been revised and the gates omitted. So the access width would be sort of, I think, around 5 meters. So the Highways wanted a minimum width of 4.5. So the highway officer is satisfied that there wouldn't be an impact on the highway safety and there's sufficient parking and maneuverability on site, including for refuse vehicles. So I say from a highway perspective, also with passing places on private lane, Highways are satisfied there wouldn't be a highway safety impact from the proposals.
So to be clear, Highways have no objection.
No, subject to conditions in the stopping up order on the strip of land at the front.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on the points that are raised by the local members. So there's obviously quite a number of points raised, but just on the question of affordable housing and the contribution of £50,000. Now, obviously, we have a policy that would require affordable housing, but there is the caveat that's obviously subject to viability. So in this case, a viability case has been made and has been reviewed by an independent person that we employ to look at our viability evidence. And they've agreed with the viability summary that's been presented by the applicant. So that's why there's a lesser amount of affordable housing and other contributions. So we managed to negotiate a level of £50,000 and that would be cascaded. So a legal agreement would be drafted to try and spend that money within the parish. And if you can't find a site to spend within the parish, then you look at adjoining parishes. And if you can't find a site within adjoining parishes, then you look at that wider across the district. So on the question about can this money guarantee a site in Bristol, the answer is no, it can't guarantee it, but it will start as a priority to look at sites there before cascading beyond that area. So yeah, so I'm happy to take any other questions on that, but yeah, I think that's at this point.
Thank you. Members, wishes to start. Councillor Brown.
Chair, just I don't want to sort of make representations at this stage. Can I just ask the officer or the development manager to flesh out what a Part Q fallback position actually means in crystal plain English for the benefit of people watching this meeting online and those in the room, please, just so that we know exactly what role that plays in the overall consideration of the application. Thank you.
Okay, so there's what we call a general permitted development order. So that's basically a document that's produced by government that says certain things you can do without needing planning permission. And one of those is the conversion of buildings or barns to dwellings. And there are certain limitations that you can convert buildings to barns to dwellings under that provision called Class Q of the Act. Now, someone can get permission under Class Q, and it is happening up and down the country where people have in effect a permission under Class Q, and they go to local planning authorities and say, well, I could do this, but actually I could do something else on the basis that I've got the permission that I could implement under Class Q, but then they will negotiate and secure an alternative proposal, which shouldn't be that much different to what they've got permission on the class Q, but it's almost a fallback. So they're saying, well, if I don't do this, if you don't grant me permission, I could do class Q. It's almost like an alternative scenario. So that's where they sort of comment about alternatives on the class Q. So in this case, our view as officers is the fallback on the class Q is, for want of a better phrase, worse than what's being proposed as part of this application. So we will see a betterment in design and heritage terms from this proposal compared to the class Q proposal. So I hope that's sort of
Thank you
provides
very
enough
much.
meat on the bones.
That's very succinct and very clear. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I add, class Q is up to 10 dwellings. So they can fit 10 dwellings in that barn. They've got a permitted development right to put 10 in there.
I say that the class Q was just for that rear barn, that was for 3 units. So what they want to propose is to replace it with a new building to comprise 3 units.
Yeah, but their permitted development right is to put 10 in there. Class Q is for up to 10 residential units.
But I say that the class Q fall back with this one, I say we approved, was approved for 3 units. So it's no increase in units from what was allowed under the class Q as the fallback.
But what I'm suggesting is, if this isn't allowed, the applicant could turn around and put a class Q in for 10 properties in that agricultural building. Can we have a comment on that?
I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate this by bringing in nutrient neutrality, but as this is in a nutrient neutrality site, just because you get a permission in the class Q, you still have to satisfy habitat regulations, and that's a process of going through and identifying what's the nutrient loading of your development and getting mitigate it. So even having a class Q, unless you get nutrient neutrality resolved, you can't implement your class Q. But as I understand in this case, the applicant has resolved their nutrient neutrality issue and can technically implement their class Q that they have. But you're right, in theory, there are opportunities for more dwellings on sites under class Q, yeah.
So I don't think the comment on money is a policy issue by the local member. I don't also see 11 houses as being too large. It seems a sensible project to me, and getting the asbestos tidy up is not the tidiest sort of farms you drive past at the moment. So I think the scheme would be a real addition to the village. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Tory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 questions. One is around the asbestos. I'd just like to understand that, because it talks about the construction environment action plan. We've had asbestos mentioned. It came up one of the pictures. You can see their asbestos buildings. So I just want to be sure that we've got the right stuff in place there, because it's near the school and people coming past. That's because it said it can be conditioned. I need to understand that the conditions are in there. And the other question is completely separate, but you said about the cascade of the funds. Is there a time limit before you go to the next stage of the cascade?
I don't recall there being time limits on previous. I don't know if Fiona has a view on that, but I mean, you need to kind of explore all options. So you need to have time to look at the options within Bristol before you start looking elsewhere.
That's what I mean. How long
Yeah.
is that time? What would be a normal expectation of that?
When the properties are available, when you know that they're nearing completion, then that discussion would be had with the affordable housing officer. They'll look at whether who is available to go into those properties, and I think it's a sort of practical consideration. And if there's no one around at that stage, when the properties are nearing completion, then they will go to the next cascade on the list.
Just want to
Simple
make
as
sure
that.
there was sufficient time and consideration that we're given the best opportunity to get it locally first.
They do look thoroughly.
So then there's the other question about asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, and asbestos is covered by other regulations. So there is there's a duty holder requirement to manage asbestos on a site. So obviously the onus will be on the applicant to discharge their duty, obviously with obviously care. I don't know the precise wording that we've got in the construction management plan, but
I think it was para 8 I wrote down, page 37. It said about could be done by conditions. And I just wanted to understand if I'd understood it correctly. When I say 37, paragraph 8, and it's actually down under contamination. Condition can be included to secure this, and I wondered if that was in the conditions. So it's actually on page
Yeah.
37 under contamination near the top, but
Yeah, I'm just checking whether whether the construction environmental management plan would be one where
yeah,
we would specifically have asbestos. I mean, if members were minded to approve this permission, obviously you could delegate that as to finalise the conditions list. to
I'll be
make sure
fine. It
we
just,
have
it
that.
said in the write-up, it said it could be conditioned. I want to make sure it is conditioned. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's a fair point.
No,
I'll-
no, yeah,
I'll make sure
because
that's
the
covered.
school and that particularly, I mean, it should be done anyhow, because of asbestos, but.
There does appear to be a construction environmental management
Yeah,
plan.
that's what I said. I didn't know if
Environment
that
management
covered it or
include
not,
meeting
so, yeah.
asbestos
No, I'll leave it
regulations.
for officers to make sure. I'm happy for that, that we make sure there is a condition to ensure that the asbestos is dealt with correctly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it may well already be in there.
Yeah, I think
was-
that was it, 'cause they need to
Oh,
more
okay, got it.
characterisation and then identify the remediation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to
Sorry.
make sure it was in there. That was all. I was trying to clarify that point. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Holiday?
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. One is, just for the avoidance of doubt, are there affordable houses being built in Bristol that this section 106 money could be put towards in the near future? So that,
As far as I'm aware, there aren't schemes that have permission or that the monies could go to. So there would be a need to identify sites to use that money on. So, I mean, £50,000 won't, in my experience, deliver you a whole unit. So it'll only be a part contribution towards the cost of delivering a piece of affordable housing. But we need to find a site to spend that money on, and obviously that's buying that site or costs money as well. So, so as part of the legal obligation, there will be a requirement to explore options, to work with people to find opportunities to spend that money. So
Okay.
that's where a housing team will play quite an active part in making sure we can spend it.
Chair, I've got another question and a
Yes,
comment, if that's all right. My other question is the nutrient neutrality. Is it going to be, is it off-site setting? I just was reading through the comments on the.
Yeah, so they've identified a site within the same ownership, but not on the site itself. So it'll be off-site. It's about 1.5 miles to the south. So they're still in the same catchment where they'll be offsetting cereal crop farmlands and replacing that with a woodlands planted area. And that's been sort of checked and evaluated by the ecological officer and Natural England, and they're satisfied with that as a form of mitigation against nutrient pollution.
Okay, I do think some heritage harm, but I also think it's heritage benefit from conserving them, so that to me balances out. I would condition VLT, reduced VLT glass. There's an awful lot of glazing, especially with the roof lights. I don't know if that's possible, please. And also the member had some suggestions about traffic calming and principal residency. And I wondered if they were going to be considered at all. Thank you very much.
I think on the traffic calming point, I think Officer Brand has already expressed that the Highway Authority aren't objecting to this scheme. So had there been concerns about highway impacts, and clearly we would have had conversations before it come to committee about how can we resolve those. But in the absence of a highway objection, I think we'll find it hard to justify asking for traffic calming if it's not required by the Highway Authority. In terms of the second home comment made by the local member, now yes, we do have certain parishes within the district where neighbourhood plans are in place and where principal home conditions are required by the neighbourhood plan. Now, Bristol isn't one of those places, so under current policy, and the current local plan policy, we can't reasonably impose a second home requirement unless it's covered by a neighbourhood plan policy or unless the local plan policy changes to incorporate that requirement. So we're not in a position where we can reasonably impose a second home condition on this site, in my view. So we are effectively, they could be sold as second homes. But that's not to say they will be, but they could be sold as second homes on that site. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Pitchfield.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. Mr. Lyons will no doubt remember previous applications in Bristol where traffic calming was raised. I can remember a long time ago. It's always been an issue, and here we have 11 properties, which no doubt will probably end up with more than likely 22 extra vehicle movements a day, particularly at the school time. Now, do they have a crossing patrol there? I don't think they do they?
Not that I'm aware of, it's just the agricultural barns on that side of the road.
No, I meant the school.
Oh, I'm not aware of the crossing.
The local member seems to have left us, so he can't actually help us with that one either.
There's no footpath on that side.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to cross.
Oh, right, okay, fine. But I do remember going back, Councillor Wilcox, who used to drive through there with his vehicles quite often, so it was a total nightmare, and that's going back probably 15 years. So I would dispute the highways. And I really do think they should go out and have a proper look at it at school times. Because I don't think I can support this until they've actually sorted out the fact that the traffic in Bristol is exceptionally dangerous.
I understand the concern you're raising. The Highway Authority would have been considering the traffic impact of the agricultural use of those barns. Appreciate the barns have ceased activity, but the Highway Authority would be assessing, if we don't grant permission here, what could be the traffic impact of a agricultural operation going on that site. So I think that would have formed part of their consideration when coming to review that there's no highway objection to the scheme, because there's always a fallback in planning terms. If we don't grant the permission, they could go back and do something on that site, and you could carry on using an agricultural use on that site without needing planning permission. So that sort of weighs in the back of a highway authority's mind when thinking about one use versus another use.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there is a school crossing patrol. To answer Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Come back, Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's a real shame to see lack of affordable. I suppose encouraging to see the 50,000 being offered up, but like I say, I can't see that building a property, just a contribution. And it's a shame to see land taken out of use. But, you know, I think on balance, the report is right, and I'd like to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown and Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think thank you to the officer for a very thorough report and presentation today. I think there's much to applaud in this application. We've got nutrient neutrality mitigation. We've got a good landscaping and design, an ethos to restore or convert dilapidated barns. However, and there is always a however, this doesn't really meet our corporate plan objectives in delivering affordable local homes for local people, which is disappointing. We've heard the development managers say that we can't impose a restriction to prevent these units being sold as second homes, which is also a concern. And so that's fault number one, as it were, with the application for me. Fault number two is an old chestnut, and it's the one of the viability assessment, which we will come to discuss on agenda item 14 later this morning. And that is the secrecy that surrounds viability assessments. I've yet to lose a bet that whenever there is a viability assessment, it's refused, it's kicked back. The applicants found, as it were, one thing. I agree with the local member that the blood money of 52,000, as some would describe it, perhaps in Bristol, is insufficient. it seems to me that there should be a percentage return by way of that contribution rather than a fixed amount that will deteriorate with inflationary effects over time. It also highlights a problem that the government creates for the local council in that the rules around how Section 106 monies are defrayed in terms of timescale and where it goes, et cetera, are very, very, very loose. And let's hope that the National Planning Policy Framework tightens that up, but I digress, perhaps unnecessarily, but can't resist that temptation, I'm afraid, in the context of this application. So for that reason, I will be abstaining on this application. I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, councillor. There's a holiday. Wish to come back?
I mean, yes, in theory, we can ask for it, but obviously it does add to the cost of developing a site when you've got VLT glazing, and obviously we have to justify why we're asking for conditions on a planning commission. I mean, whether applicants are even, because it's a deluxe area, it's not in the area. No, the reason I'm hesitant is because it's not in the AONB, and that's the predominant area where we've got the dark skies issues. That's why I'm saying we just need to be careful that we're not adding more cost onto the application that then might, at the other end of the calculation, affect what we get back from affordable housing contributions. I mean, whether the applicant agents here, whether that inclusion of VLT for them would give rise to concerns that they couldn't make it viable. I don't know.
Could you come to this microphone, please? Nobody can hear you.
We've not done any cost analysis into the addition of that glass, as you say, because it's not in the AONB. It wasn't something that was raised during the course of the application.
Okay, but would you give consideration to it?
We'd give consideration to it, yes.
If the committee were minded to make it a condition?
I think there would have to be, it would depend on the wording of the condition, I think, because if it added significant cost, it would be how that would then be offset elsewhere. But yes, we would certainly consider it.
Okay, thank you.
No, I mean, that will require some quite carefully worded minuting of the meeting, because clearly that's agreement to BLT will be subject to considerations of viability, won't it, in the sense of if we're adding another, I mean, I don't know what, personally, I don't know how much additional that will add to the cost of glazing, but I imagine there'll be several zeros at the end of the extra cost on that in terms of thousands rather than hundreds. But, I mean, if members want to see that imposed, and we can have that discussion with the applicant, and we'll do our best to secure it, if it means that there's no impact on the monies that we get back from the Section 106 obligation. Because I wouldn't want to do something that then has a knock-on consequence elsewhere.
It's ultimately up to the committee whether you wish to impose a condition or merely request that discussions take place with the applicant on that matter, given that it is not an AONB, not dark skies area.
Yeah.
I'm inviting comments there, so that's personally up.
Thank you, Chairman. I see some merit in the roof lights. I'm not sure about the side elevations for having the reduced lights bill. Thank you.
So I'll hand up this side first. Yeah, that's a toy.
It was only to comment on that, Mr. Chairman, that I feel that it's next to a town and a busy main road, and the disruption is already there to wildlife, and that's probably not necessarily something we should condition. That would be my position. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
I was really going to just point out what Councillor Toy has already said. It's actually a very busy area. although it's Bristol, it's just over the border from Melton Constable. That's actually, it's built up as a railway town and is quite congested. So I would be concerned about, additional costs that might reduce what Councillor Brown has said is a rather meagre amount of 50,000 towards, affordable homes. But for all the reasons raised by Councillor Patterson, I'm very happy to second his motion to accept the proposal.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Anybody else wish to speak? If not, we'll go to the vote. We're voting first on PF 23/2048. Right.
Sorry, it says in the recommendation on page 42, commuted sums and open space contributions. The reference there presumably is affordable housing financial contribution, is it not open space?
So the commuted sum is for the affordable housing
Yeah,
contribution,
thank
and then the other sums will be sort of open space contributions required under the policy as well. So commuted sums in addition to.
In addition to this, 4
Sorry.
obligations.
Yes, there's GRAMs, there'll be open space contributions and the commuted sum.
Affordable housing, GRAMs, open space, and then the off-site nutrient neutrality mitigation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want that clarified in the committee. Thank you.
Okay, we're voting first on PF/23/2048, which is for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in your paper and not modified.
Was that going to include the asbestos concerns that were raised by councillor Foy? And also, I presume it's not going to include the VLT glazing that was suggested by councillor Holidays. I just need to be clear so I know what I'm going back to the applicant on.
Okay, councillor Holiday.
The roof lights. I mean, because these country towns do shut down at night. I mean, even the busy ones people stop driving along roads, and at night, you know, the roof lights will be on. And it isn't an AMB, but you know, geese will be flying overhead.
I suppose that's a matter for councillor Patterson because he made the proposal. So
I think that's a sensible suggestion by councillor. Yeah, I do think that's doing the roof lights in the reduced glazing seems a sensible condition to have.
Okay, so we're happy that we add that condition in before we vote. Do we need any further mention of asbestos? To my view, it's covered by the existing conditions, but
You've got to abide by the law, haven't you? So it's not a planning issue, is it? It's
asbestos is going to be a problem like any old farm buildings. Okay, with that minor additional condition, can we go to the vote? Lauren?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beatty,
abstain.
Councillor Brown,
Abstain.
Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch-Stillett,
Against.
Councillor Hankins, Councillor Heinrich,
For.
Councillor Holiday,
Abstain.
Councillor MacDonald,
For.
Councillor Manstini Boyle, Councillor Neverway, Councillor Patterson,
For.
Councillor John Toy,
For.
Councillor Kim Toy, 4, and Councillor Vickers.
4.
So that is 8 votes for, 1 against, and 5 abstentions. The vote is carried.
Thank you. The application is therefore approved. We now need to move to the associated application for listed building consent LA/23/2049. Again, you'll find it on page 51 of your papers. There's approval subject to the conditions set out. I think do we require another closing seconder?
Unless councillors Patterson and Vickers were proposing for both.
Okay,
Happy to propose.
Happy to second.
thank you, councillors. Okay, if you can go to the vote, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beatty,
Abstain.
Councillor Brown,
Abstain.
Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch Tillett,
Against?
Councillor Hankins, Councillor Heinrich,
For,
Councillor Holiday, Councillor MacDonald,
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle, Councillor Neverway, Councillor Patterson,
For.
Councillor John Toy,
For.
Councillor Kim Toy, and Councillor Vickers. That is 8 votes for, 1 against and 5 abstentions.
okay, both applications are approved. Let us move on then to our next one. Wells next to sea, PF/24/1123. Dr. Brown, would you like to present?
Yes, the application is for the erection of a single-story side extension, alterations to fenestration, an addition of 10 dormer windows, replacing existing roof lights, addition of solar panels, creation of pools to the rear, and alterations to landscaping and parking. This is referred to the planning committee by ward member Councillor Fisher, given the concerns over parking, overlooking, likelihood of noise issues in a quiet area of town, and the weight of local objections. Just since publication of the agenda, further comments have been received. Broadly, same concerns as before, but welcoming the omission of gates that were included originally. And the town council additionally have provided further comments about conflict with the Wales design guide. So this is the site location plan and aerial. It's within the Wales Conservation Area. Opposite is St Nicholas Church, grade 2 star, with cottages around the building, including several that are grade 2 listed in the conservation area. These are the existing and proposed site plans, so the proposed also enclose the rear space and add landscaping to this, creating a plunge pool and separate the access lane with a low level fence to the south. So these are the existing and proposed ground floor plans. So it includes internal alterations, removing partitions to open up the space, and extension on the side wing to the north to bring this level with the wing on the south. So these are the existing and proposed first floor plan, again showing internal alterations indicated. And these are the existing and proposed roof plans showing the replacement of existing existing roof lights with dormers and installation of solar panels on the south roof slope. These are the existing and proposed north and east elevations showing dormers on the first floor level and larger, more contemporary openings on the ground floor level. The principal elevation would largely remain unaffected from the street scene. And these are the existing and proposed south and west elevations, similar to the north elevation for symmetrical design and larger openings on the rear ground floor level. So these are some visualizations showing the proposals, also showing the obscure glazing that would apply to the lower half of the dormer windows on the first floor. So these are just some photographs of and around the site. So this is the rear of the site, including the Women's Institute building, and also sort of a small access which leads on to a private lane to the back and the neighbouring properties to the south. This is another view of the side to the south, looking towards St Nicholas Church, and also showing the rear of the building and the sides of the building. And this is a view of the north side around the rear of the building. And this is a view of the front of the site, showing the principal elevation, where it's got this distinct decorative facade and makes a positive contribution to the conservation area. And say these are the main issues. So the principal development alterations to an existing building is broadly supported. Highways have raised no objections, taken into account the use of the site and existing context. The design is considered acceptable with appropriate mitigation, including obscure glazing incorporated. And the proposals are not considered to impact significant views towards from the conservation area or designated assets. As such, say the main facade will remain the main focal points, so no objections from conservation grounds. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Okay, thank you. Nice and clear. There's a number of speakers. We start with the town council speaker, Mr. Argyle. Come to the front. Could you put that document up on the screen, please, Laura? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief and direct if I'm going to the limits of time. 2 issues. First, the alterations to the building. Unfortunately, your documents do not mention in the policy documents the neighbourhood plan design guide. There is only a passing reference to it in the body of the text. It's therefore section 665 referring to dormer windows, which are discouraged in the design guide, or section 7.4 dealing with windows generally, particularly those at the front, which completely transform the building and are out of scale for their size. I recommend that you look at the design guide before making any further comments because it's specific to Wells. It's important that members should have these restrictions drawn to their attention. Second issue, amenity. The report says that there is no de facto change of use. Page 61 of your documents, para 7, says that it will still be a youth hostel. That seems to me difficult to understand. Whatever the legalities, the situation on the ground is one that rightly concerns Wells people. When the Church Hall and WI were built in the early 20th century, both were effectively public amenity buildings, both used by the public. Even the youth hostel was not a private organisation. Anyone could join, not restricted by financial constraints. Also, Wells is not a place where legal boundaries were known. Much space was shared, including the car park presently shared with the WI Hall. The WI may not have owned the space between it and the Church Hall, but then its use was and is shared. What is proposed will kill the WI. It will be impossible for vehicles to turn round in the space available. Members will not be able to attend by vehicle. To say that this is a civil matter may be true, but it is insensitive and does not respect the realities on the ground. In particular, the WI makes use of its premises during the day and early evening. The time restrictions on noise between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. may assist residents, but they're of no use to the users of the hall. The times when the plunge pool and the barbecue, not mentioned in the officer's report, are likely to be in use are just times when the hall will be in use by the WI. The officer report makes no mention of the barbecue, but only of a plunge pool, which in fact is not a plunge pool at all, but an active swimming pool. It's big enough for it, which envisages outside activity during the day and early evening. And lastly, the fact that the WI was not even consulted or notified about any of this, it may not be necessary, but the whole thing strikes me as being a matter of courtesy and out of respect for the town as a whole. It seems to me that this is an ill-considered application when it could be used for affordable housing owned by Homes for Wells, if that were possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no objecting speaker. I have one supporting speaker, Tom Lee. You wish to come to the microphone, please? You have 3 minutes to make a case.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning and thank you, councillors. My name is Tom Leahy. I'm the architect, the applicant, the owner of the church rooms in Wells, and I'll operate the rooms now and long into the future. Last year, the YHA sold off its loss-making hostels. Despite being one of the largest hostel brands, Wells had lost money for 4 years and had given up on all but large group tourism. We bought the building with a plan to change this decline. I'm an architect and I have 6 similar properties in a UK-based boutique brand that successfully renovates and now once successfully renovated, the buildings are occupied for about 230 days a year. To give some context, there is no bookings between now and the end of the year for the current church room. Corporates fill our midweeks, and weekends are a mixture of fitness retreats, well-being retreats, and multi-generational travel. Typically, it's grandma's birthday with all the cousins all bundled in together. Our properties are in national parks and AONBs exclusively. We're not in party towns. We're not a party house. I plan to invest between £1 and £1.5 million to bring this building equal success, and then to add the building to my collection. We asked during pre-app advice what use class we should apply for, and had good conversations with the officer, and we're encouraged to keep the use class existing and unchanged. Our proposal reduces the number of beds to 2 per room, adds en suites and a garden with a small pool. Now, I acknowledge the objections. As an architect, I'm used to it. And we responded to everyone as best we could during the application and updated the design accordingly. What did we change? There was deep concerns that we'd proposed to lower the parking from 10 spaces to 6, which is what we needed. So we increased the number of parking spaces to 8, adding 2 and offering 1 to the Women's Institute on the road so that they wouldn't have to have difficulty going down their access track. There was concern over access because we proposed ornamental gates that were supported by design and conservation. So we removed the gates. And we widened the track from 7 feet, which is its current width, and the civil agreed width, to 10 feet to make access and emergency vehicles and all of the concerns much more easy to get down. There were concerns over planting plants nearby the WI windows. So we removed the plants from those areas. And there were concerns about noise. So I clarified our noise management plan, which is best in class and combines very strict rules, sensors, text messages, and physical management. Just 1 page left, sir, if that's all right.
Yes, please continue.
Thank you. I have, as I say, 6 similar properties, and I'm yet to receive 1 noise complaint this year. Finally, I remind that we are not changing the use. Yes, we sleep less people. Yes, we have en suites rather than bunk beds. And we have a DDA compliant bedroom now on the ground floor, and we've planted a garden. These are all improvements. They are investments in a wonderful building in a bucolic part of Wells, and I'm confident that I can bring the objectives with me and show them what a good neighbour we will be, and as a strong, well-invested tourism asset for the town.
Thank you. Right, local member, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. The thing that most concerns me is the number of Wells residents who are going to be adversely affected by this application. There were 60 households putting pen to paper to show their concerns, and they're on pages 55 and 56 if you'd like to look at them. We've heard from the representative of the Wells Town Council of the concerns that they have that this application does not comply with the newly established design guidance and codes. Wells Town Council objects strongly to this application, and their reasons are on page 54 and 55. We've just heard that this party house is not a party house. It's more like a youth hospital for grandmothers. My biggest concern and the difference between a youth hostel, Shirley, and this application is that a youth hostel used to have a manager who lived in, and if you put a foot out of place, he would certainly sort you out. The existing youth hostel building is situated in what could be described as one of the quietest areas of the town, opposite the church and at the southern end of the high street. The High Street is no longer a centre for shopping, but 100% residential. Church Plain is funnel shaped and at its narrowest point at the junction with High Street and has unrestricted parking. And this is one of the first places that residents and people coming into the town find to park in. It's always full. I was there yesterday, tried to park, couldn't. And at the narrowest point, it's very difficult to drive through. And I think the added pressure of this application on that area is going to cause more and more problems. You may say, well, there's no parking at the building at the moment, but every time I go past it, there are at least 3 or 4 vehicles parked behind the youth hostel building. It's quite unrestricted at the moment. There are no fences. And as the town councillor said, this has been a shared property for years. I think the Women's Institute was formed in something like 1923. Highways state that the existing parking at the youth hostel is adequate. However, as vehicles are expected to park with their noses against the face of the wall, it inevitably means that only the smallest of today's modern vehicles will not overhang the footway. Larger vehicles will cause wheelchair users, mothers with prams and pedestrians to take to the road to avoid them. Parking, as I've said, is already a problem in this area and will be made worse, there is no doubt. The Women's Institute will be most affected by this application. They have had unrestricted use of the area for many years. There will no longer be the ability to drive up to the door of the hall to allow less physically able members to access more easily. There is a real concern that the membership will be affected by this application. I think it's naive to think that a noise restriction is enforceable in a party house, whereas the on-site manager of youth hostel was able to rule with a rod of iron. There will be no one to control the actions of the partying residents. If there is somebody who's going to text, I can't believe that much use will be made of it. The damage will be done and people's lives will be affected. The WI hall is mostly used out of those designated hours, as we heard, and no benefit will be coming to them. The application in its present form should not be considered. So many locals are affected by commercial greed with little benefit to the town. If members are in any doubt about this application, I would invite them to defer until a site visit can be arranged. This would better allow members understanding of how this application will adversely affect so many residents of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Do officers wish to make any comment before we go to the vote?
No, not the space.
Okay, thank you. Right, yes, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry if I missed it. Can I have some clarification? Is there no living manager proposed then?
I don't believe there is, but I say with the, it's a bit of an unusual application. The only thing I say that's been requested is sort of looking at the external works to the build, you know, the actual operational works. The application submission sort of sets out that they're not looking for consideration about sort of potential changes of use. It's just the physical external works they're looking to get planning permission for with the application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 56, under representation, the last representation is this is concrete porches in the Wells neighbourhood plan. Has that plan been consulted in order to draw up this presentation?
Sorry, I missed the last part of your question. So has the plan been consulted on?
Yeah.
Yes, as my understanding, it's been through a local referendum and the plan was passed. So it's now been made. So it's effectively part of the development plan for North Norfolk, the world's neighbourhood plan.
Well, in which case, why is this contrary to policy? This proposal.
I mean, that's the view that's been expressed by the person who's written in objecting to the proposal. I mean, unless Mark knows more, I mean, I don't think it said anything particular about which particular elements of the neighbourhood plan it was contrary to. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to.
So I think some of the concerns raised was conflict with the design policy of it, and also that sort of relates to the local design code for Wales as well. And also sort of some of the parking stuff too. So I say I would say some of the concerns raised were probably reflected by the Wales Town Council speaker, conflict to the design aspect. So that's the reference to that. That's been raised, sort of, yeah, the impact on design and the parking impact in the locality.
Thank you, Chair. Just to assist, just to assist my colleague, if you refer to the final paragraph of the planning balance and conclusion section on page 65, the officer has expressed the view that the proposals are considered to be in general accordance with the development plan policy considerations, including the requirements within the Wells neighbourhood plan and provisions with the MPPF set out above. So I heard the representative from the town council point out that he thought the neighbourhood plan had been neglected. I don't think it's the policy of this council to neglect our neighbourhood plans. I think, you know, we promote them, we like them, we want more of them. So I think the officer has covered that, and that may assist Councillor Hankins. I do appreciate the concern of the pressure that might be put on our environmental protection team if this were granted and there was misuse or abuse of the facility. You know, if it became, if Wells suddenly became the stag party capital of North Norfolk as a result of this application, we would be rightly concerned, and we should be concerned. So to assist the management of the building, if this proposal were accepted, could we condition that we have a sui generis use class provision, so that if any alteration or amendment or infringement of the use class as a youth hostel in future would generate a further planning application or, you know, certificate of lawfulness or whatever, to assist in the management of the building? Would that be a possibility? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yeah, I think there are valid concerns, and I would support something that would prevent bookings by large single-sex groups, particularly of younger people.
Yeah, it's my understanding that I'm not sure whether we can condition that bookings have got to be separate, and whether, you know, we have the right to inspect the bookings information or records kept, you know, by the applicant moving forward. I'm not sure how far we can go on that, but perhaps it's something that needs to be answered.
Thinking back to conditions we imposed on that apart hotel application, which is in some ways, in my view, similar. How can we manage this?
I mean, this is really tricky because the application isn't proposing a change of use. Now had the, well, as a fact that the application isn't putting forward a change of use. Now, there was pre-app advice received from the applicant, and that was envisaging a change of use. So they haven't put that forward. For me, in terms of for my colleagues in the enforcement department, because they will be no doubt be called upon if there's alleged breaches, is how do we differentiate between a youth hostel and a property that's effectively a large dwelling that's been used for holiday bookings. Now, a large dwelling for holiday bookings above the sort of 6 bedrooms is typically a sui generis use, and we've won appeals on that. We had a recent appeal not that far away on that particular issue, and the inspector did back our point that a residential use that's more than what you'd expect from a residential property in terms of the numbers of people there, it starts to get into a sui generis use. So a youth hostel is a sui generis use. So going from a youth hostel to a other use would need planning permission. And the fact that the applicant hasn't applied for planning permission means that they would have to comply with the youth hostel requirements in order to occupy the building on the back of this conversion. Now, we haven't suggested it because the applicant isn't proposing a change of use, but it's a matter for you as a committee if you wanted to reimpose a condition that sets out how the building should be used. I mean, the applicant may not be happy with that, but that's something that's open to you as a committee to do. So it's unambiguous. Everyone's clear what's been granted by this permission. Because if there is then a subsequent breach, then there is a route to enforce that breach by a breach of condition notice. Because clearly the concerns raised are that this could metamorphose into something that isn't what the applicant is proposing right now. And it's about how do we manage that? I think having a condition or a note's less stronger than a condition, but something that kind of makes it clear what we're expecting if we were to grant permission for this development.
So if I can just come back on that. Well, I mean, I would be very much in favour of a condition. I like the lack of ambiguity, and I'm sure the enforcement team and the environment protection team would as well. So I'm just thinking about the pressure on resources in the council moving forward if we weren't to impose a condition and merely make an advisory note, which would, I think, create undue uncertainty. And I think you know, I would propose that and would ask for a seconder. I would find it difficult to vote for this application if we didn't have that, I'm afraid.
Are you able to give us an approximate form of words and such a condition might take?
I'm just using that as thinking time. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
That's what you're here for.
And we can just suggest something on the lines that the use of the site shall remain for youth hostel purposes, because that was what was granted the original 98 permission, although it didn't impose a use condition. That's what it granted permission for, was for youth as a youth hostel. So a condition that kind of reimposes that requirement to use the site for youth hostel purposes would seem reasonable, and the reason for the condition probably would be for the avoidance of doubt and to make sure we can sort of manage the impact of development on surrounding properties.
Perhaps it could invite a comment from the applicant if they have sites elsewhere in the country. Surely this issue is not, you know, hasn't been raised elsewhere, and what their reaction to it would be if we were to move forward with it.
I wouldn't normally bring back as a speaker.
But
I
it's
think an issue that needs clarified.
Yeah.
If you can come back to the front, please. No, not you. Not you, sir. The applicant, Mr. Lee. Yeah, could you clarify the use and the nature and how you would find a condition that's been suggested by Councillor Brown?
You'd like me to write the condition?
No, I want your comments on how you would react.
The existing use of the building is for single large groups that come and rent the entire building. They self-cater. There hasn't been an on-site manager since pre-COVID, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's a small youth hostel. And so as a result, it doesn't, there's no point doing a financial assessment of it. the YHA themselves stopped managing it 5 years ago and let it to single large groups. So in that respect, you know, when I say there's no change of use, it's because there's no change of use. We're doing exactly the same thing, just to a slightly higher end clientele. In our, you know, it's very difficult to, you know, obviously to persuade concerns, but we genuinely we don't create the concerns that are worried about. As I say, we do have these fantastic sensors that send text messages within 2 minutes. And if the noise doesn't return down to the accepted and agreed level, we have a housekeeper within every town that we operate in who lives typically within 200 meters, who comes straight down there and tells them all to shut up. But we don't have that problem because of our price point, because of how we market. We are, as I say, it's team building, it's yoga retreats, and it's multi-generational family. If I wanted to do stag do's, I'd open up in Bristol or Norwich or whatever. That's not the business that I operate. Now, I understand the concerns. And particularly to the point around the Women's Institute, I actually wrote to them 3 times, never got a response, but that's a side matter. I genuinely don't think we will have an issue, but if we wanted to create a condition, I think it would have to be around noise. And if the noise was breached, and if disturbances were breached, and if the barbecue was causing huge issues, you know, then they're all things that can be managed civilly. I think, honestly, for a business that's already failing, but any onerous condition, I think would not stand up to a challenge. That's my view.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can see where Jeff is coming from and made that. I mean, you could have some sort of condition because there's a different use class between a hotel and a hostel. And I was funny enough just looking up the case law on it. And there have been challenges to the difference between the usage of such, you know, modest charges, payments sometimes made by agents of public bodies, an express indication of a hostel. Those accommodated at the hotel are normally transient. So there's differences, and you could have a condition saying will be used solely as a hostel and not as a hotel to try and distinguish that difference, which I think members were concerned about. And you could try and impose a condition like that to clarify that that is what the use class of the building is.
How enforceable would such a condition be in your view?
I think it would be enforceable because that is what the current usage of the property is, as I understand it. Jeff might have a different view, but I think we could impose such a condition.
Good. A lot of speakers lined up. Just come back to you, Councillor Brown. You were making a proposal there for such a condition as you discussed.
Yes, Chair. Yeah. And if I can just correct the record for the minutes that I said stag party, so that I'm not discriminatory, can we add hen party as well? Just for the record, sir. Thank you.
Which I've heard are apparently a lot worse. There we go. Is somebody prepared to second that? Okay, thank you. We'll hold that back till we get to the final vote. That we can include that condition, please, before we get to the standard. Right, I've got a long list here. Councillor Kim Toy next.
Hello, right, I'll try and get through this as quick as possible and as logical as possible. The applicant kindly clarified what it was going to be used for single large groups. And I have to agree that I don't exactly think that Wales is a place to go for stag do's and hen parties. And yeah, I certainly could think of lots of other places that are more suitable. But also I cringe when I see or hear people being very, what I think is very judgmental against perhaps younger people, because you possibly think of younger people, but this isn't the case. As the applicant says, it's the price is marked so you're going to get a different sort of clientele. The other, so I would probably at this time support this application. Parking is a problem in Wales. It really is. It's just the nature of the buildings, the way it's laid out. So that's always going to be an issue. The one thing that I did see on somebody's objecting letter was a picture of parking outside the building. As far as I know, obstructing a pedestrian pathway where somebody, especially young mums with their children, have got to leave the safety of the parking is actually illegal, and you can be prosecuted for this. But I don't know if you do it if you're partially on a highway, or whether it's different if, like in this case, I believe the car would be partially parked on private land. But nonetheless, that is an issue for me. So, but I don't know what could be done with that. And that's all I have to say at the moment. That's the only bit that really worries me about this application, is the parking outside and the obstruction of the path.
Are you ready to propose?
Yes, I'm happy.
Yeah. Right, I have Councillor Holliday, then Councillor Mancini Boyle, then Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. Well, the Cambridge Dictionary definition of a youth hostel is a place where people, especially young people, can stay cheaply for short periods. So I think this doesn't look like a youth hostel anymore. So I have real trouble with the no change of use definition here. There is something in the Wells neighbourhood plan about principal residency that talks about no more holiday accommodation unless it's an established holiday complex. And I don't know if a youth hostel calls it is the definition of a holiday complex. So I'm not sure about that. I think this for me has lots of problems, but there's one minor question. This obscure glazing looks as if it's a panel that's been installed in front of the windows and could be easily removed by people. So if there was going to be obscure glazing, it would be actually the glazing itself, not an additional panel, I think. But that's a very minor detail. The back glaze, the glazing on the back elevation, I think is completely inappropriate for Wells. I know it's not visible from the street, but it's very out of keeping with the building. And it is in the AONB. So if this was going to be approved, I would request produce VLT glass on that, if this was going to be approved. Thank you very much.
Would that be a reasonable condition for that particular window?
I mean, there are some benefits to the pros in the sense that they're losing roof lights and replacing them with windows that aren't emitting lights upwards. It's a view for the committee if you want to impose VLT. We are in the AONB here, but again, we are in a fairly urban setting, but it's a matter for the committee. I just wanted to pick up on the point about when is a youth hostel not a youth hostel, and this sort of goes to the nub of the issue, really, doesn't it? In terms of how does that then impact on the Wells neighbourhood plan requirements for a principal residence? Because if it was going from a youth hostel to become a dwelling or some other kind of sui generis use for large groups, for sort of renting out for holiday use, that could trigger the requirements under the neighbourhood plan for a principal homes condition, because the neighbourhood plan says you should only be allowing new holiday accommodation in sort of complexes or holiday complex areas. So this isn't in that sort of area, so it would be contrary to that plan. But this comes back to the point, this is not what the application is proposing. It's not proposing a change of use, so therefore technically it's not called by that policy because it isn't changing the use, but that's dependent on them using it for youth hostel purposes. And we get back to this circle where we kind of work, well, is it being used as a youth hostel? Is it effectively changing to something else? I think that's going to cause a lot of us headaches for quite a long time as we work out when does a youth hostel become a sui generis holiday accommodation, particularly when they're being used for large bookings for a single group. It's hard to spot the difference between that and a holiday home that's being used by large groups. Yeah, it gives my enforcement colleagues nightmares trying to work out how do you say one use is happening that's different to another use. Yeah, I'll drop that one in down. Let you sort of.
Yes, okay. Councillor Monsignor Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 55, as the members has mentioned, the 60 representations have been received objecting to this proposal. That seems quite a lot for a youth hostel. Just quick clarification on that, without going into details, obviously. Dare I say, is this a true representation of the residents of Wells, or dare I say, possibly a block vote of some sort?
Yes.
I'll say they're not all necessarily local addresses, but obviously anyone can write in, and I think some of them were might have been like a mailer letter that went out, which people then signed send in. But I'd say it's obviously something people are quite emotive about locally and beyond. So I can't really answer that, but obviously, not sure on that side.
I think I would just add to that. I mean, it's not always about the quantity of representations, it's the quality of the representation. So if they're making valid planning points, then it's something that we would need to take into account. If it's obviously a non-material consideration, then obviously we would give that less weight.
Very brief, yeah, that was my point really, because quite often we do get people sending in objections, and it's the quality of the objections, because you could have a garage with 40 mechanics in all voting against one proposal. So I'm glad you do take that into account. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, one of the objection letters mentioned that the youth hostel had a quiet time when noise had to be kept to a very low level between 10 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning. Would that noise abatement rule remain? And the other point I wanted to make is I agree with you, Chairman, this is incredibly complex, and before I vote for any conditions, I would really like to understand the implications of them. Thank you.
I think we all would like a little bit more clarification. Oracle youth hostels are open to all ages, so that doesn't change this proposed use, but must admit, I have some concerns, not necessarily overwhelming, of course. Where are we now? Councillor John Toy, then I'll come back to you.
Sorry, Chairman, could someone answer, one of the officers answer my questions on the noise restriction time? Is that remaining for the youth hostel?
I'll say it's something we can include as a condition as part of a sort of a management plan, given there is potential for more outside usage than would otherwise be the case, particularly with the pool aspects. I think that's something we have included on the list. So I think reference, as I say, is made to that. So I think.
Yeah, so I mean, we recognise the concerns that are being expressed locally about use of the premises sort of in the evenings, and how that, if it, let's say, were to be used for large groups and they were being noisy, that could have quite an impact on residential amenity. At the minute it's a car park and they're adding a plunge pool and other things in that space. It makes it more attractive to use. So that's why we're suggesting the condition where we're sort of limiting the use of that garden so that it's not used beyond 10 PM to 7 in the morning. So effectively giving the neighbours a break so they're not then subject to potential noise concern.
And I think it's something else in the supporting documents too, that they would try and adhere to that quiet time too in the supporting documents as well.
Councillor John Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's difficult about this is they've not asked for a change of use. So actually we're only voting on the building and the adjustments. And in those terms, it is welcome that the building will be brought back into use, that it will be tidied up and it will be protected for the future. However, I'm absolutely behind Councillor Brown that we need to be very strong about how this is conditioned, because I know that area, you know, the local member's absolutely right. It is narrow. With the number of bedrooms, I don't think the number of parking is enough, and Wells already has a parking issue. I absolutely understand that we're not voting on that today because that's not been put in front of us. But I think as a council, we need to be strong that it is for the local amenity of people, that condition that Councillor Brown has already laid out is, and that's why I was prepared to second it. But we do need to remember that we are voting on the structure and not its use. It already has that use class, but we need to make sure that that's what continues. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. You're secondly. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we all have concerns there. You know, we have to deal with the application, which is for the changes to the building. There is no change of use proposed, so we cannot consider how that use might change once the building is altered. You know. So it's a tricky one. And we, as always, we must deal with the application as it sits in front of us. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, having heard the applicant speak for a second time, sounds like a large holiday let to me. And I would also like to point out price point. It doesn't mean that your guests then behave better. Doesn't always work like that. I'm struggling with this just for the loss of amenity for local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just to remind you that if the application is refused when we come to the vote, I will then require a further vote on that refusal and some valid reasons as to why. Coming that point deciding if we need to defer, should have done it earlier. So we have a proposer to accept the recommendation, which is for approval from Councillor Kim Toy, seconded by Councillor John Toy. Can we take a vote, Lauren, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And just to confirm, that is with the amendment that has been proposed.
With the amendment, yes.
Okay. Councillor Beattie? Councillor Brown?
Or
Councillor Fisher? Councillor Fitch-Tillett? Councillor Hankins? Councillor Heinrich?
There's some concerns for
Councillor Holiday? Councillor MacDonald?
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle? Councillor Neverway? Councillor Patterson?
Against.
Councillor John Toy?
For.
Councillor Kim Toy?
For.
And Councillor Vickers?
For.
So that is 9 votes for, 2 against and 3 abstentions. The vote is carried.
Thank you. The application is approved with the conditions as set out and amended. Thank you. Right, it is 11:10, so I propose we take a 10-minute break. And then we will come back and deal with the final application and the other matters on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back. We now proceed to our last application. It's Chroma PF/24/0201. If you remember, we deferred it from the last meeting as the speakers were unavailable. Right.
Thank you. Yep, the applications for the erection of a single-storey dwelling with a detached bike and bin store at land to the west of the Glass House, Vulture Avenue in Cromer. The application has been called in by local members, given the local public interest, and their view is windfall development in a sustainable area for development. So this is the site location plan and aerial. The site is garden land to the west of the Glass House. The railway line is adjacent to the south of the site, and Cromer train station and platform is located to the east. So this is the existing and proposed site plans showing retaining an integration of the dwelling within the existing trees on the site. These are the proposed floor plans. It will comprise a two-bed property. East of the dwelling would be the bin and cycle store, and the parking area further east. So this is shading and lighting details. So this indicates there would be sufficient lighting levels internally through fenestration arrangements and the use of roof lights. This is a cross-section of the dwelling and there's a relationship to the existing trees. This is a proposed view from the street scene, so it would appear relatively discreet on the street scene, mostly screened by hedging with facing brickwork on the front elevation to appear unobtrusive from the general street scene setting. And these are the proposed side elevations and bin store. So there'll be more contemporary design and materials, the use of cladding and fenestration. Also illustrates the topography of the site on the embankments. And this is the proposed rear elevation of larger glazing to maximize lighting into the property, contemporary geometric design, vertical use of cladding, and there would also be a green cedar roof. So these are some photographs of the site. This is Glass House and Vulture Avenue towards the dwelling. And this is the view westwards, showing the trees which would be retained and also showing the steep drop of the land on the embankment towards the railway line to the south. This is a further view westwards, showing the hedging on the streets with Vulture Avenue on the other side, mature trees on the embankment, which I'll say the trees make a positive contribution to the street scene and the conservation area. So this is a view eastwards from the west of the site. Dwelling would be contained within the existing trees in quite close proximity. And these are more recent photos of the street scene, showing the site and sort of showing the extent of canopy on the site from the street and also from the platform at Cromer train station for context. So as per the officer's report, the recommendation is to refuse based on the conflict between safety and amenity of future occupiers and the close proximity of the trees. This would increase the likely pressure for inappropriate management and removal of trees, which would become increasingly difficult to assist with the dwelling on the site. Proposal would therefore harm the character and appearance of the site to the detriment of the local landscape and conservation area. Benefits are not considered to outweigh this harm.
Thank you. Move to speakers. I have no town council speaker, no objecting speaker, I have one supporting speaker. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Krzysztof Fiolkowski. Yeah, maybe make sure the mic's on there. Right, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, councillors. Thanks for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants as a friend and long-term Cromer resident itself. The applicants for this planning request are long-term 20-year residents of the adjacent property, the Glass House, and have spent a very long time indeed thinking about this project and considering the very best way of making it work in sympathy with the site. It's worth noting that the applicants are themselves design professionals with specific commitments to questions of sustainability and environment. Conservation and responsive design and the synergy between them have remained at the heart of their plans, as well as the desire to make a really distinctive, pleasing and sympathetic contribution to the architecture of Cromer and its wider economic and cultural development. They and the architect have worked very closely with the planning department to respond to guidance raised during the process, including making all necessary adjustments after the first round of application. It's worth noting that the application has received no public objections, but quite a large number of letters of support, reflecting the community and neighbourhoods trust in the proposed development and its conservation approach. So in particular, the question of how to accommodate and sustain the trees on this site has been a particular concern. Though it's worth noting that the specific location is not a woodland as such, but a railway cutting in a residential area. So the shape of the plot between the public highway and the railway line makes it a challenging and unusual site, but it also means that the proper and legal management of the trees in view of safety and accessibility is already an ongoing responsibility to the applicants, regardless of the outcome of this proposal. Network Rail's recent clear instructions to the applicants are that they are liable for the management of the trees next to the railway line, where safety issues mean that they must be regularly trimmed. In short, any objection to the application on the basis of the supposed future management problems of these trees seems to me largely irrelevant, since this management is already obligatory. While the trees themselves are not particularly significant or ancient specimens, the intention and priority of this project has always been to preserve them. Indeed, they make a unique feature of the proposed construction rather than a problem. In particular, the current proposal doesn't involve the removal of any trees at all, only the continued management of them in the same way that any trees in residentials would require. We'd also note that in relation to questions about the partial loss of hedgerow, that it was the applicants themselves who planted this hedgerow in the first place. Lighting levels have been tested and are judged adequate, and as well as the arboricultural impact assessment and other professional reports already carried out during the planning for this project, detailed guidelines of the UK Tree Council have been used to ensure an effective but sympathetic and responsible approach to conservation in cases where trees are close to buildings, which is a very common situation for many properties everywhere. Any possible objection based on the assumption that future residents of the proposed new property might take a different approach feels like a somewhat speculative one that could be raised for any number of current and future developments. And in any event, the council's existing tree preservation order protocols are in place to protect management of the site, just as they are for any property in this area. And we assume that they're robust. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have both local members present. You have 5 minutes between you, so who wishes to go first?
Do you want me to go first? Yeah, all right, I'll go first. Thank you, Chairman. Well, good morning, and a more straightforward one for you now, members. The reason we've called this in is we believe it's sustainable development in a sustainable location, and as you've heard, windfall, and secondarily, it delivers a net gain of planting. A few sites like this really emerge, and in the event development occurs, it will also provide a dwelling initially for a young person who is an existing resident of the town. On the constraint, we do not have any highways or heritage concerns whilst it is in a conservation area. It's not an area where nutrient neutrality is an issue. I certainly, respect the officer's position around trees, but I would go as far to say I think we're being overly cautious in this case. The residents, as you've already heard, are already obligated to adhere to a strict maintenance regime that pre-exists this proposal. And as those of you who have a rail line through your ward are aware, Network Rail do specify this to residents who live alongside rail infrastructure for the obvious reasons of maintaining the operation of the train service. And as you've seen in this instance, the existing property and this one would be immediately adjacent to the rail line. They therefore must already maintain the trees to a high standard, and this does not really change because of the development. The maintenance obligations through condition do not represent an onerous additional task to the residents or the future property owners, and do exist whether or whether not the development occurs. There is a schedule of new and additional planting proposed, demonstrating the applicant's wish to retain and improve upon the planting, and measures for ongoing maintenance outlined in the arboricultural impact assessment, which could be the basis for conditional approval if granted. We have obviously trees as close to the building we are sat in now, and overhanging trees exist in many other circumstances. So I'm confident this development is achieving the right balance, or I certainly wouldn't have called it in. So again, sustainable development, limited impact, it will fit into the site and the conservation area, and as you've heard, almost universal support from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you. Yes, I'm speaking also in support of this application. It's rare we have land available for building houses. In this area, suitable plots are hardly ever found. This plot is a bit different. So was the glass house when it was built in a conservation area 20 years ago. The design of the new home will blend well in with the existing property, and much thought has gone into the design to make it as environmentally friendly as possible. Care for the natural environment has been central to the planning. The ecological report suggests low risk to wildlife by the development too. It's vital we build homes for families in North Norfolk, particularly with such an ageing population. This home will be for a young Cromer resident. Focusing on the trees that exist, the plans to retain all the trees, and they're an important part of the local area, and the property owner has tended them for the last 20 years. I can't see that they would change, and they have a legal obligation to anyway. The building's sensitive to local setting. It will not be very visible from the street view, and highways raise no major concerns. Fulcher Avenue has a supermarket yard and a small estate of late 1980s houses. This property certainly would not detract from the area. I'm happy to support the application as it brings a welcome, innovative construction and a desire for an accordance with its surroundings. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Couple of questions from me before we go into debate. Do all the trees on the site have PPOs on them?
No, so they're not TPO'd, it's just within the conservation area.
Okay. So we have no total control over what happens to those trees at the present time, other than.
Well, I say they would need permission to do carry out works to the trees, so it does afford them protection. Also, we have got a tree officer available. I say he might be able to better clarify the protections for the.
Yeah, could you comment, please?
Yeah, of course. So the conservation area rules protect all trees over 7.5 centimetres measured at 1.5 metres. These trees are clearly bigger than that, so they are afforded protection. If any work needed to be carried out to the trees, there's a notification process, and at that time the authority can either agree to the works, have no objections, or we may decide to serve a tree preservation order.
Okay, so we have control of what happens to those trees.
They would need to make an application, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's clarifying that. Thank you. Second issue I have really relates to the slope of that cutting. I mean, if I'm looking at the plans correctly, the current boundary with Network Rail is at the bottom of the cutting side. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be our understanding from the site location plan. Yeah, but yeah, I say yeah. So it's the boundary. Yeah, they own the embankment, and it's the bottom of the slope.
Okay. Calling back, I seem to recall in the earlier days, the actual boundary with the British Rail, as it was then, was along the top. But things can change. Have Network Rail made any comment? Because I'm concerned that we have a steeply sloped cutting side there. And I know our local geology is not the most stable. And the trees are current, and the undergrowth is currently holding that embankment up. So are Network Rail concerned in any way, or do they require access for management of that?
I said that they did give us comments. I think it was more in just relation to the landscaping and obviously the emphasis on the owner's responsibility to maintain, ensure, I say, hedging and things doesn't overgrow. And it's their responsibility to maintain that and avoid obstructing the running of the railway. So nothing specific about the actual embankment per se, more the landscaping aspect.
So then they're not concerned that a new structure at that point would affect the stability of that cutting side.
I don't think that was raised. I think it's more just in relation to the new hedging at the bottom and how that gets maintained, ensuring that doesn't encroach over the lands.
Okay, thank you. Members. Councillor Fisher.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My concern is the trees, as I understand it, there is much underneath the ground as there is above the ground. How does the construction of footings or how the whole construction is going to take place take into account any roots that are cut through or the proximity thereof?
So I'll say with this, they in the arboricultural assessment, they do include details of micropiling to try and avoid and sort of a cantilever approach to avoid direct impact to the root areas. So they are sort of demonstrating that they can do it without direct impact to the trees and the root areas per se from more conventional build construction methods. So I say the concern is more the indirect issues of having the heavy canopy from the trees over and additional pressures for management and issues of the dwelling in close proximity to those, which as now is pointed around 1 to 2 meters from the trees and how they are effectively maintained, and also creating apprehension for people living below having such large branches and things overhead as well type thing.
Good. Yes, Councillor Holiday.
Has the applicant contacted the Network Rail Asset Protection Team as recommended in the Network Rail comments? Because there's something about placing additional load on cuttings, which I think speaks to your point, Chair.
Yes, it does. I mean, they're more concerned about embankment because they have no idea what the fill is on embankments.
Right.
Sorry, I'm from Norfolk Rail Group as well.
Right.
There's an interest
There was
in
a
these things.
That was a recommendation from this consulting.
But they haven't commented.
I'm not sure, but obviously I suppose that might await the outcome of the application before discussing that further with Network Rail.
I'm sure they'd take a view if you're sticking even micro piles into the top of a steep slope like that. It's a bigger concern for me actually than the trees. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, from my previous experience in my working life, I would certainly expect there to be covenants for support between the landowner and Network Rail or their predecessor, British Rail. But that is essentially a civil matter, an issue between the landowner and Network Rail, and is something I think out with what we should be considering today, in my view.
Can I just say members aren't misinformed or misguided on this, because I've just looked it up and there does appear to be, where you're building within 10 metres of an operational railway, some requirements about risk assessment and method statements, construction, design and management regulations. So members are on the ball.
Thank you. Councillor John Toy.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, but is that a planning question or is that a building control question? That I think that's, you know, in planning we can say yes or no, but is it building control that says about the way it's constructed and how it affects the, I don't know. I'm just looking for clarity on that. Thank you.
How things are constructed would, to my mind, would fall under building control response. So we can grant the permission for the envelope of the building, but how it's physically constructed would come under building control sort of control. But in terms of how a building would impact on trees, that would fall within planning. So we'd have control over things that would affect root protection areas or damage to the trees. That was something that would be under our control by conditions.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, good.
Chairman, thank you. Notwithstanding all the things that we've spoken about there, I actually think that provided it can be constructed in a way that's, if micropiling works, and protects the trees, and it's seen as a small building. We don't often get smaller buildings being built in that space. It's accessibility to services. I mean, can't be without question, with the store next door and the shops. I mean, and it's been built in an environmental way. So actually, my balance would be to actually approve. So I find it difficult to support the officer's recommendation at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Remind members that the recommendation is for refusal. To proceed.
I mean, I'll just say this. I mean, we have, like Councillor Toys has said, we recognise there's a lot in favour of this application in terms of sustainability. It's in a very good location. You can't get much better for sustainability side of things. But we then weighed that against the strong possibility in our view that there'll be pressure to fell those trees in the future when residents are living in there. There's a different set of scenario that the tree officer will have to consider, which could then mean there's more points in favour of losing those trees. So I think if you're going to make a positive recommendation, as long as you recognise that those trees could then eventually go or could be lost, then you're going to have to weigh up that decision against the benefits of allowing a development in what is otherwise a sustainable location. As long as you, as a committee, you weigh up that decision, then the decision is yours ultimately as a committee.
Chairman, so we just had an application where we tried to think about what its uses might be. We don't know here, provided we've got the protections in place. We don't know what the usage would be or what will happen. We can't speculate. So I think there are similarities in that terms of we're dealing with an application. It has protection on the trees. It's got a method of construction that's been suggested to protect them. So yeah, so I still sit where I am at the moment, Mr. Chairman, but I'm prepared to continue listening to the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson and Councillor Netherway.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the officer's got it right. It feels like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole here. So I'll propose.
Okay, thank you. Just a little bit. Councillor Netherway.
Not professing to understand a lot of what's going on here with this particular application. Is there any reason why we can't avoid the question of the trees and just simply put a TPO on them?
I think we've been informed by an officer that the existing conservation area restrictions are pretty much as good as a TPO.
Okay,
the
thank
TPO
you.
could be enforced very easily, I suspect. Would that be correct if we needed to?
We could serve an order to preserve the trees, but also a planning application does overrule that preservation order if that's the way, the committee decides. So bear that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holiday.
I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? Okay, the recommendation being proposed and seconded is for refusal for the reasons stated on page 75 of your papers. Let me have a vote, Warren.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beatty,
Against.
Councillor Brown, Councillor Fisher,
Okay.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett, Councillor Hankins, Councillor Heinrich,
Against.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor MacDonald, Councillor Mancini Boyle, Councillor Netherway, Councillor Patterson, Councillor John Toy, Councillor Kim Toy, and Councillor Vickers. So that is 4 votes for and 10 votes against. The vote is lost.
Okay, we now then need a recommendation from the floor for approval and with any condition, and with reasons, please, and any conditions you might wish to see, or whether you would wish to leave those conditions for the Assistant Director of Planning.
So if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, I think for me, it's just purely about planning balance and that we've got the right protection in there. So there's not anything different to what's been put in front of us. As officers said, you know, they found it difficult and there was that balance to be had. And I think that the balance for us is different in that it's what it's going to provide in the location it's in, to balance against the protection of the trees, which we've got stuff in place for, actually leaves me in a balance in favour. So I don't know if that's a suitable reason, and I look to officers for guidance on that. But that's for me essentially what it is. There's no specific thing. It's just a balance.
Thank you. It would be useful to have compliance with policy. And somebody was well enough up on all our policies on top of their heads.
That's why I say if officers could give us some assistance or guidance on that, how we may be able to address that, we'll welcome it. Thank you.
So if I'm reading what you're saying that probably the sustainability benefits of the proposal outweigh any potential harm to trees on the site.
Given that they're already, the method of construction and the protections that are in place are sufficient at this time to do that.
Right,
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second the proposal to give consent to this. I just like an advisory that obviously the applicant should work very closely with Network Rail on the construction side of things, and also with our tree officer on the future management of the trees moving forward. But otherwise, I think the sustainability argument does slightly outweigh the harm that would be caused to the trees on site. So I'm happy to second it, as long as we put in the appropriate conditions, Chair.
And you're happy to leave the final word in conditions to the Assistant Director?
Yes, I am, Chair. I'm
Okay,
confident that they will produce that.
You got enough to work on, you?
Yeah, we can work on that.
Didn't get much choice ultimately. Okay, so we have a proposal now from Councillor John Toy, seconded by Councillor Andrew Brown, to approve, subject to conditions to be set out by the Assistant Director of Planning. You can go to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Beatty?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Fisher? Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
Against.
Councillor Hankins? Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Holiday? Councillor MacDonald?
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle? Councillor Neverway?
Okay.
Councillor Patterson?
Against.
Councillor John Toy? Councillor Kim Toy? And Councillor Vickers. That is 10 votes for and 4 votes against. The vote is carried.
Okay, so the application is approved. Let us move on rapidly. It's 10 to 12. We don't want to be here all day. Item 12, development management performance update. Lions, up to you.
Right, I shall keep this relatively short, you'll be pleased to hear. So page 77 of your agenda sets out our performance for the month of July. There are 3 major decisions issued all in time and 77 non-major decisions issued. 6 of those went over time, unfortunately, but our 24-month figures still look pretty good. 100% for majors and 96% for non-majors. And our appeals record, again, still well above what the government say we should be doing on that. So yeah, so enough to keep us in the platinum ballpark. But yeah, happy to take any comments on that. Otherwise, we can move on to section 106 obligations.
Any comments?
Good work, Mr. Chairman. I think we can give that a platinum award yet again.
Yes, and long may we retain it. Well done, officers. 106. Yeah.
1 or 2 have not appeared on the list because they've been done over the summer quite quickly. Cabbage Creek completed very quickly. National Trust thanked the council for that. They're already doing the works. agricultural barns being signed. There's 9 Section 106 agreements for the land north of Tillier Business Park, and they're being worked on at the minute. They're being circulated. And the large Fakenham urban extension agreements have all completed. The land south of Norwich Road, North Walsham, there's only 3 points outstanding now. These are county council points. And there's ongoing discussions between the developer and the county council on those points. We really hope that the Norwich Road, North Walsham Section 106 agreement will complete within the next 7 weeks.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know if I should have declared an interest. Page 79, agricultural barns is in my ownership. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're familiar with that one. And the fact that this is your property. Okay, item 13, then appeals.
Okay, so page 81, we've had a couple of new planning appeals come in, but we've had a fairly slow month from the inspector in terms of decisions, so no planning decisions from them for that month. But we have had some enforcement cases decided. So if you look on page 86 of your agenda, there's 2 appeal decisions relating to enforcement matters. One in Bodham where we have been successful in defending the appeal. That was dismissed, but one where the enforcement notice was quashed at Gunthorpe. The inspector didn't agree with our position that the alleged breach of planning control had occurred. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's immune from enforcement action. It just means that the inspector didn't sort of agree with our allegation of breach of planning control. So I know the enforcement team will be looking at that decision and see what steps they may need to take next. But yeah, overall, yeah, 50-50 on decisions.
Well, they are on enforcement, not on decisions that have been made into actual planning terms. Implications. Okay, and then what could be a long one, hopefully not. Agenda item 14, the planning service improvement plan, the local validation list.
Okay, I've got a few. Lauren's going to put a couple of slides just to talk through this one. That'll be the one. We'll start with that one. Okay, so for those that you aren't familiar with the local validation list, so this is when people submit planning applications, there's a set list of documents they're required to submit. So there's a national requirements for planning applications, but also councils can have their own list where there's specific requirements they think need to be accompanied with a planning application. So we've had current local list dates from 2017 to 2019. So it is a little bit out of date now. And there's a fairly urgent need to keep that updated, because when they get a bit aged, our ability to invalidate applications because they haven't had all the information provided, it's impossible to say, no, we can't validate the application. So what the impact of doing that is that it can and does delay planning applications whilst we wait for additional information to be provided by an applicant. That usually requires further extensions of time, or in some cases it means we have to refuse a planning application because information hasn't been submitted. So if you just go to the next slide. So this is just for information. This is what the NPPF says we can and can't do when it comes to local validation lists. So we are supposed to be proportionate in our requests, so we can't ask for everything under the sun. We need to justify why we're asking for information to support a planning application. I've just highlighted and underlined the 3 words that are quite important. So it needs to be relevant, necessary, and material to the application in question. So yeah, just go to the next slide. So in your pack, I put together the long list of validation requirements that we're proposing as part of the new improved local list. So there are 54 specific local requirements. Now, before you start to panic and think, my goodness, does that mean every application will need 54 documents to accompany it? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean that depending on the circumstances of a particular application, so where it's located, what the development proposes, then it may need elements of those 54 documents to be provided to help officers and to help you as a committee when making your planning decisions. Because we're obviously reliant on the information that comes in from the applicant when we're making that planning balance. So this list is really about sort of just, getting that list into play. And before we can do that, we need to go through a period of public consultation. And once that public consultation has been completed, we will bring that to a planning committee. I'm targeting the 12th of December. So if you're minded to agree to the recommendations to go out to public consultation, we'll do that probably from the week commencing the 7th of December. I think I've got a timeline next. There we go. That's my expected timeline. So if we do a 6-week public consultation, we'll begin that around the 7th of October, week commencing the 7th of October. Once that closes, we'll make any revisions that are required to the documents, and we'll bring that back to you as a development committee, the sort of final sign off. And if all goes well, we'll start on the 1st of January 2025. So actually the document, it says 24 to 26. I think we'll rename it to local validation list 25 to 27, because that will then align with that time window. So the recommendations, is to any comments on the lists. And I know it's a long list, but any comments? I need to get your agreement to go out to public consultation. Just saying we'll bring it back to you, hopefully on the 12th of December with a finalised version good to go. There will be a lot of supporting information that we'll put in the public domain with the final version. So we'll have quite clear matrices so people can say, oh, I'm doing a house order application. These are the documents that I need. We're also going to put some examples in there. So for members of the public, they may get confused as to what they need to submit. So we'll do some examples of perhaps someone wanted to extend their house in the conservation area. These are sort of documents that you might need to provide. So some kind of real world examples that will help people navigate their way through a local list, because it can be quite daunting if it's the first time you've ever submitted a planning application, having to kind of go through all this and work out what's needed. I mean, for those that do it regularly, the professional planners, this shouldn't really present too many problems, but it's just making sure we get that right balance. And if you wanted to go to the list, it's a long one, but I mean, I wasn't necessarily anticipating full and detailed comments on all 54 of the obligations. I don't necessarily see members wanting to do that, but it is interesting when you start drafting a list and then there's sort of overlaps in some of the requirements. And actually, even since I've drafted this, I've spotted one change that I do want to make to the 53rd requirement. Because there's an overlap between another requirement that Environmental Health asked me to add. So it makes one's head hurt having to draft a local list of this length. But hopefully you get the sort of gist in terms of the sort of requirements that we're asking for. If you wanted to go through any particular new ones, so there's quite a few new requirements. We have one that might be of interest to members on climate emergency and a net zero statement. So we're asking applicants to sort of explain how their proposal responds positively to a climate emergency. I know lots of members at committee have asked the questions about how does this application help us meet net zero. So having that requirement will hopefully, we're not asking for war and peace on every document. Officers don't want to be reading through hundreds and hundreds of pages, but just a little short statement that says, we've considered this and we've done that. It helps officers make that view that actually someone has considered the issues and they have responded positively. They've made choices about materials or choices about equipment to go in the building that will help on that net zero journey. So there's one new one. There's quite a few requirements. If you look from 29 to 36, quite a few new requirements relating to plans. So that's been one of the bugbears of my officers. They always say, well, the plans aren't quite right. There's no north shown, or the plans need further updates. That's the sort of thing that eats into your 8-week or your 13-week determination that then requires extension of time requests. So what we're trying to do as a council is to reduce the time it takes to make a decision. And if with an updated list, the clock won't start until those documents are in there. So your 8-week period doesn't start until we have all those documents in place. So that helps the team. They can get more decisions out quickly, and we go from a platinum to something even higher than platinum as a performing authority in terms of the speed of decisions, because that's the key to me, is how can we shorten the time frame it takes from submission to making a decision? And that will make the biggest difference to applicants who can get a decision in a shorter time frame. So yeah, that's a sort of short synopsis. Happy to take any questions, but the recommendation is as on your report. Thank you.
Councillor Massini Bore.
Thanks for that, Jeff. I don't want to give you loads more work, but when you say consultation, do you mean out of parish councils or existing people with applications in? Because my concern is that we as a committee, although we're not all experts, we sort of know more than your average Joe Blogs of our residents. So are you going out to consultation with the residents, people who've already got a planning application in, or if somebody applies for an application, puts an application in, will they get involved in the consultation? I just want us to understand what you mean by consultation, really. And I want to make sure residents are involved as well. I don't want it to just be our views and your views. I'd like the residents to be involved as well. Thank you.
When I say consultation, it's the full consultation. Anybody can respond. We're not just saying it's open just to you as members or to parish or town councils. It's anyone who's involved in the planning process, or even if they're not involved, they might want to submit an application in the future. We're trying to garner all views. I mean, agents and applicants, we particularly want their views because they're the ones that will be using it on a daily basis. When we did it last time, back in 2017, I recall we had next to no responses from people until the local list went live, and everybody was piping up saying, I don't like this, or I don't like that. So we'll use as many channels as we can to engage with people, just so that we can get their views, because we want to get it right. We don't want to tie people up in bureaucracy, because it's not in anyone's interest to do that. We're just trying to find a proportionate level that helps us make decisions in a timely manner.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a very, very comprehensive list. Try and pull it apart personally. But I think my only concern is that there is a simple checklist for householder applications, and they'll be the ones where they're more likely to be caught up by not knowing which documents they need if you live in a conservation area, perhaps. And they're the ones who may not take the expense of getting a professional architectural technician, at least, to draw up the plans. Which strangely isn't that expensive, because you still need building control permission, and that costs a lot more, and the drawing is a lot more detailed. So you might as well do the whole lot in one go. And that's an advice I'd give to people from my own personal experience recently. But we do need to make it very clear, that we expect a reasonable quality, particularly of drawings coming in. A pencil sketch on a bit of graph paper, which I've seen before, probably not ideal, especially when CAD packages are readily available. So if we can make it simple for householders, because anybody on a large development is going to be using professionals anyway. It's the ordinary person in the street who wants a small extension or a conservatory or something, who really needs to be absolutely clear, and they can see a checklist and tick it off and seek advice as necessary. But otherwise, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit of news for you from Ada AGM yesterday is there is a move for IDBs to become a statutory consultee, and that's going up to the minister shortly. The only thing is, in the Guardian yesterday, apparently the new government is about to abolish IDBs.
The new government's going to watch this space.
Well,
Policy will be
apparently
from one
everything's
area, changed by somebody else.
Drainage has been highlighted in Manchester and London and nowhere else.
Yes, and we're the ones with all the drainage issues from past farmland.
Well, we're going to lose an awful lot of agricultural land, but then they're trying to lose that anyway.
Yes, I mean, of course, the Broads have been managed for several centuries. Not always well. Yeah, perhaps too good in terms of some certain aspects of wildlife conservation, though, as some would say. I wouldn't say go along with that, but we'll never agree on that issue. Okay,
Depends
anybody
whether
else
you've
wish?
got wet feet and to be able to eat or not.
So I've said before, which aspect of grazing marsh don't some people understand? Councillor Brown and Councillor Tully.
Yeah, I just want to address this with the portfolio holder, hat on, as it were. The consultation process, is this discretionary or mandatory? What did we do in prior to 2017? Did we go out to consultation then, the public?
Prior to 2017, we didn't have a local list.
Right.
But in 2017, we did go out to public consultation. As I say, we'd had very little response from agents and applicants, which is quite disappointing, if I'm honest. So yes, as I understand it, it is a mandatory requirement to do that.
Oh, that's fine then. Yeah, I was just wondering whether we were, putting unnecessary pressure on resources and cost in going out to public consultation. So if it's unavoidable, that's fine. I'm surprised that there isn't a section for planning performance agreements on major developments as a move forward to make them, more required in most circumstances, because that's an income stream to the council if we encourage those. So I was just wondering whether that being considered and discounted for reasons that don't occur to me. So that's one point. I think in the nutrient neutrality section, that's item 25 on the list. It'd be useful to have a link of the areas defined by Natural England in both special areas of conservation on the Wensum and the Broads. I think that would be a useful link. I wonder if we're going to put applicants on notice that the list is likely to change on the 1st of January. I'm thinking of people that may be putting applications in between now and the 1st of January, so that we don't invite criticism that, we didn't tell people, and all of a sudden after the 1st of January, we're running the rod over current applications and saying, we need further items. So there's an issue there, and I agree with the chair that we need to be mindful reputationally of not sort of cronyism with the planning fraternity and making it more difficult for householder applications. I think the chair's point about having a simple checklist for householder applications is a valid one in my view. And apart from that, I think if we're mentioning conservation areas, we should make it clear that in the Claven Valley, there is more than one conservation area. So we might just want to make that absolutely clear for avoidance of doubt in the narrative. That's my lot, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Toy. Oh, go ahead then.
Okay, so in terms of the planning performance agreements, we haven't put those in there, but we have got the one about section 106 obligations. I mean, it's a judgment call, isn't it? Whether we think it's a validation requirement to have a planning performance agreement, because normally those would take place before you submit the planning application. So that would normally occur at pre-application stage. If you're doing a PVA properly, you enter into that agreement beforehand. So I couldn't quite see the relevance to having that in a local list, but I would say we're open to reviewing it and adding things if we think it's appropriate. But perhaps we can have that discussion offline afterwards. In terms of the nutrient neutrality point, yeah, happy to add some links in there. We've got some web content which is being updated actually as we speak on nutrient neutrality, so we can add the nutrient neutrality web link in there. And I've now forgotten what the last point you made. Sorry. What was the last? Councillor Brown, what was the last point? I let him, yeah, that's it. Sorry, my brain's fried today. Yes, in terms of the transitional arrangement, so there'll be a transition from one to the next. So I have sort of started thinking about that, because we'll get applications that come in before Christmas that might not be validated until the new year. So we just need to make sure that we make it clear that if you submit it before the 1st of January, a bit like happened with BNG, so as long as it gets submitted before January, so before the January the 1st, it will be done under the old local list requirements. So we may end up with a landslide of applications before Christmas, but that is what happens, unfortunately, when you go from one system to the next. You have to have transitional arrangements, otherwise it causes chaos. So as long as we are clear, which we will be to applicants, then that's fine. And on the householder point, I agree completely with what you said about making sure it's clear for householders. We are looking at a householder guide for the validation process. So you've got, say, the examples of, in this scenario, this is required, but also sort of a short householder guide so that applicants who don't submit very often have got some element of hand holding through the process, because it's quite difficult if you're new to it to know what you need to submit with an application. So there's a fair bit of work that goes on, not just doing this list, but other things as well. But yeah, we're trying to make it as simple as possible and as proportionate.
Yeah, I should say, Chair, thank you to Jeff and his team, because obviously a lot of work has gone into this in the background. So I think on behalf of the committee, we should say, thank you.
Yeah, certainly second that.
For moving this forward on our behalf.
Councillor Toy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, actually, as Jeff said, is a planning performance agreement part of the validation, and I'll leave that for the discussion that you're going to have. So, because I questioned whether that was necessary for that. But the other thing is, I guess we need someone to propose that we're going to put this out.
Do we need a formal?
Does it need a formal?
Secretary on this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, you're going to propose that?
Yeah, I'm happy
that
to
we
propose
take
that's
them,
what's needed.
Take 1, 2 and 3 on block.
On block.
Can I have a seconder? That's another way. Okay, we can. Thank you. Makes that easier. Right.
Back in the 12th of December.
Yes, I will be here. I don't land back at Heathrow till 10:30.
Not enough time to get back there.
Okay, meeting closes at 12:15.